I'll start. So I'm Jonathan Peterson. Thanks for coming to my talk. It's a lightning talk, so it should go pretty quick. But yeah, this talk is about portable deserialization payloads using Go, basically generating serialized payloads in Go. Going to be talking about what it is, why we did it, how it works, and all that. But before we get into all of that, it's probably useful to find out who I am. So you already know my name. These are my handles: Lobster Jerusalem's the work stuff, Deadjack's the personal things. And yeah, most of my career has been in penetration testing, and I moved over to vulnerability research and exploit development, which is what I do now at VulnCheck on the initial access intelligence team. So just to give you a brief overview of where all this came from and a little bit of why we did it. VulnCheck is a company that basically sells access to a data feed, our data feed of like exploit and vulnerability data for emerging threats, things like that. And whenever these exploits and vulnerabilities come up and come by, we look at the most interesting ones, generally the ones that are unauthenticated, remote access vulnerabilities that would be most appealing to attackers. And whenever we find those, we write our own exploits of those, we weaponize them, and we basically do all of this in our own framework called Go Exploit. It's a Go library that we built from the ground up. It's open source software on GitHub, available for anyone to contribute to or use, so please do those things. And this talk is centered around a recent addition to that library. So the recent addition is basically allows for .NET and Java serialization gadgets to be generated right from Go. And before we talk about why we do that, we should probably talk about how you currently do it. And currently, if you go on GitHub, find a POC that's based on deserialization, it's probably going to tell you to go download ysoserial.net or ysoserial, depending on if the target's .NET or Java based. And this is going to involve setting up, in the case of .NET, a Windows environment in order to run it, and in the case of ysoserial, the Java program, it's going to require you to set up a JRE version 8 environment. Not super daunting tasks for most people, but depending on your experience, it could range from trivial to not so trivial. And especially if you're selling these exploits to customers, it can be problematic when you're telling them, hey, you bought this program, now go download this other program to use my program. It's not a great starting point. And also, you have to consider some of our customers are in secure environments, and they actually can't get ysoserial.net approved to be in their environment, to run it, and therefore might have to wait some amount of time, possibly months, to get that approval to run that program in their environment. And even if they can get the approval, it may be even more difficult if they are not running in a Windows environment already due to security reasons for the ysoserial.net stuff. So not the best one, like best option to go with. So one way around this that we found was we could just take a blob. So you can generate that gadget from ysoserial.net or ysoserial and decode it or generate it as raw. You get the blob, and then you can dynamically patch that blob at runtime based on user input that's provided. So a lot of this is going to require editing, like linked fields or linked prefixes for the gadget itself and the like any strings or something. So for instance, the command that you pass in, the target that's parsing the serialized object needs to know the length of the string to come, and so on and so forth. And so you end up just having to patch the gadgets manually. And it's also prone to failure with things like .NET, where if you just glanced at it and didn't know a whole lot about the serialization protocol involved, it looks like just 2-byte length encoding. In fact, it's 7-bit encoding, and it's like a whole different thing. And that would break the gadgets whenever you get a command of a certain length. So point is, it's not the best option and prone to failure, but also whenever you're selling exploits to people, and I know we all read our exploit code before we run it, every one of us, without error. When you open up the exploit code before you run it, and you see a giant blob, you're pretty much obligated for obvious reasons to go and decode it and make sure it does what it says it does. Nobody put any weird, nasty command before or after the command that you put in to do something bad. So what's the third option, and why did we do it? The third option is we try to construct the gadgets in much the same way that the actual .NET and Java libraries that these things come from construct them, using their serialization protocol. And that basically looks like, if you looked at a gadget and you decode it all the way down, it's a giant binary stream. And you can break up these streams into like little individual groupings. So you might look at a stream and the first few bytes would be, the serialization version header saying to the target, hey, deserialize this using the serialization protocol version 1.0. And then the next grouping of bytes might be the system class with like a class name and a field name, a foo, and the data type. And if it's a primitive, there's additional data that goes into it, things like that. And this isn't a whole gadget. This is just one piece of a gadget. This is the class info. You can see there's the first 4 bytes. That's the object ID, and you can compare it with the documentation. That's basically what I did. I sat down, took a gadget, first with .NET, then with Java. I took a gadget, compared it to the specifications that exist in Microsoft and Java for the respective gadget I was looking at, and then started breaking down how to read these, what these look like, how they're laid out. And it turns out they're laid out a lot like data structures because they're data structures. So again, you can see just the names, that's the linked prefix, hextin, so on and so forth. And you have many different types of records in both of these protocol specifications. Here's a Java one. It's very similar because it's also a serialization protocol. But you get the general idea here. I didn't put a whole lot of this in here because I already wrote 2 blogs that probably consist of a total of about 40 Google Docs pages for anybody who wants to read that, and I don't want to bore you all to death and have you evacuate the building or fall asleep first. So this is just a brief overview of what I did and how I did it and what's happening under the hood. So basically what I did was I looked at it, looked at the gadget, I looked at the specifications, and then since we could talk about them and model them as structs, it's pretty easy to just go ahead and code them as structs. So that's what this is. It's a custom type struct in Go, and we're pretty much recreating a lot of these individual records that would be present in a gadget. And then once we have it like that, we can just make the structs, make the methods, and then in those methods we apply the logic that's present in the specification to the best of my ability. And then we go and just generate it like this. We build all the structs, we look at the gadget, we line them up, and then we run the method to turn them all into bytes. And then you have your gadget. And whenever you're actually using that as a library, it ends up looking like this. Just one line to generate the gadget. And then if you actually are targeting like ASP.NET or something, you can use one more line to create a view state payload. And we also have support for the newer than 4.5 framework, .NET framework versions that do encryption and HVAC signing combined with the SP100, 108 key derivation algorithm, along with like an app path, like you would when you're passing decryption keys and stuff to isoserial.net. Now, that's how you use it as a library. It is a library. We're talking about it as a library. If you don't know Go, then you don't necessarily have to learn it. I took the next obvious step once I created the library and made a pretty thin wrapper like CLI that takes command line flags, and you can just generate them pretty much the same way that you would generate using isoserial.net or isoserial. Now, we're already getting around the necessary setup of a JRE, like version 8 environment, as well as a Windows environment for the .NET stuff, respectively. But if you aren't familiar with Go, it does have a pretty cool property that the cross compilation in Go is super duper easy compared to something like C or Rust or something else where you have to pull down like a whole lot of libraries. If you ever cross compiled anything, it can be kind of a pain. Whereas with Go, usually with like Mac and Linux and stuff, and even Windows, they have an MSI now, you just install Go, or you could just download the release binary from GitHub like you usually would. But also you can cross compile it easily to any platform that you would conceivably for the foreseeable future want to run it on or generate gadgets on, like even a Raspberry Pi. It's just trivial. You change 2 environment variables and you're there, which is pretty cool. And that's just a property of Go, and part of the reason we picked Go for our entire Go exploit framework platform. And you already saw how to generate a gadget and using Go as a library, just import it and run that one line. So now I'm just going to show a demo of the CLI tool as well, so you know I'm not lying. Let's see. Oh, it is full screen. Okay, cool. And it's only a minute long, but I am going to talk over it a little bit so you understand what's going on, since it's just a bunch of terminals. So first, what's going on is we're going to run Docker Compose to set up a vulnerable target. This is just a Tomcat host that's vulnerable to whatever CV that was. I'm having a memory. Then we're going to set up an HTTP server locally. This is just going to receive the HTTP request from the payload that we're going to run. So this is just printing out the curl command. This is the payload. As you can see, it's going to take the data binary from the first argument passed to it whenever I actually run it instead of just cat it. And that's going to be the file that we generate using this tool. Running the actual tool to generate the Java gadget, and it's going to, like I said, write it to a file. I feel like I type slow. Okay. I'm going to pass the file. That's what we want to get. And then we get the curl command back and to prove command execution. And I mean, it would work the same with WISO serial. You're using the exact same program, just with different flags. And that should be it. That's the tool, and that's the talk. And also, if you need to contact me or anything, there's the contact information. Also, I probably should have put the URLs in here, but there's those blog posts I talked about. They're up on our blog at VulnCheck, and that's for anyone who I basically go into detail about the serialization protocols and implementing those in code in great detail, and how to read the specifications since they can be a little bit wonky. And that's just for anybody who would want to do the same thing in any other language, because there's no reason you have to do this in Go. You can do it in any language and generate gadgets in much the same way, and even use our code, our library here in Go exploit as a reference. And Go exploit does have that library under the .NET and Java packages, and then Go Serializer is actually the CLI tool that leverages those libraries in order to generate the gadgets as I've described. But yeah, that's it. And I guess now would be the time for any questions. Yeah, so he's basically asking, if anyone couldn't hear it, you know, a little bit more about what the process was like for comparing the two and then actually generating it in Go. And it's funny because the first time around I went with .NET because that's what I needed at the time for an exploit that I was working on. And I did a lot of it like by hand. I mean, all of it's by hand, but compared to how I did it in Java, it was a lot different. So I noticed that the documentation was just really hard to read. That little graph that I showed that showed the breakdown, like pretty much useless. The information beneath it, a little bit more useful. Again, it's in the blog, but they weren't very descriptive about certain things and expected, I guess, some level of intuition that I don't think anyone really has unless you work at Microsoft or something. I don't know what they were doing. But then I started looking around for the Java ones, because when I was looking at the Java gadgets, they're a lot simpler. They don't use like 7-bit encoding, and they aren't as weird with all the like primitives and additional infos. They're not as difficult to implement. But with Java, it's just very, very verbose. Because you'll have like an entire serialized object inside of as a value in an array, and an entire serialized object that is then a value in an array and a serial, and so on and so forth. And it's a giant pain. But then I found this really cool tool called Zcar that's written in Go as well. Happen to be, it doesn't need to be. And that allowed me to just pass a binary gadget, like one of these, like the raw form gadget that I was talking about, into it, and it would just dump out the individual sections, which was really cool. feel like there's probably an easier way to reverse that back into gadgets or something, but I just went ahead and like broke out those sections and then re-implemented those in Ghost Rocks. And so, yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting how similar the two protocols were. I mean, obviously they're going to be similar, but like down to how even the data types are represented, like is just crazy similar. I mean, it's kind of interesting, but about as interesting as you would expect this kind of thing to be. So yeah, not mind-boggling, but kind of cool.